And action!
And welcome to Udder Twaddle Podcast, Episode 3.
Yep, this is number 3.
The third in the series.
I wasn't going to repeat myself this time.
No, but you did it anyway.
Wow.
Do it every time. Hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. Little experimental podcast journey as it evolves.
It's kind of like vlogging without the vlog, without the V. We're blogging in our own way.
Yes, a vocal blog.
It's a vocal blog, so a vlog?
You clean that up. That's just nasty.
Well, just to introduce ourselves, if you haven't listened before, I am Cowpatty.
And she's nasty. I'm Cowmando.
And welcome to the Udder Twaddle podcast.
I think we already said that.
Oh.
This week on the podcast...
Oh, yes, we are going to talk about action movies. We got in a tear after reviewing Bumblebee last week about what makes a good action flick, so
it did,
I wanted to share that.
But recently we've gotten a friend of ours hooked on the show Supernatural.
We keep getting her hooked on shows.
Yes, we got her hooked on Game of Thrones, and now we've got her hooked on Supernatural.
And you can watch them all on Netflix.
Yeah, you can stream all of them on Netflix up to the current season. And it's a really good action TV show.
Fantasy. Well, it does have
fantasy deals with supernatural
horror in
creatures.
a way because it does have gore.
Kind of, action horror, but I mean, it's very action heavy. And that got me thinking about action movies and sort of the, recent, by recent I mean like the last year or two, influx of what I consider extreme action movies.
I tend to think that there's been a straight, steady dishing out of good action movies over the years. I just feel like
there have been.
It's been a steady feed because everybody has those like summer action flick urges.
There are, always a steady flow of action movies, but I'm talking more of the extreme action movies of the last, 2, 3,
Oh, they just
4
try
years.
to push it to the edge?
Yeah, that are, you'll get some stuff that's, action and drama or action and comedy, but the ones that are just almost action for the sake of action. There is story there that gives, the protagonist a purpose, but beyond introducing the purpose, the movie is just action, action, action.
Ideally, you're thinking John Wick. I know this.
John Wick is a primary example that, within... I don't know, the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the movie.
You get the purpose of the film,
you get
the heart,
the purpose. And
then it's like...
everything from that point on to the end...
it's just adrenaline, action.
A roller coaster ride of action and adrenaline.
And great choreography, great gunfights, car chases,
You've
all
got
of that.
Some other stuff, along with John Wick, you've got the Jack Reacher movies. And a lot of, there are a lot of people that like the Jack Reacher movies. A lot of people have complained about the Jack Reacher movies because they're not accurate to the books.
But in their own way, they're good.
Oh yeah, they're good. They're good action movies. Whether you agree with, the casting of Tom Cruise, as Jack Reacher.
I think Tom Cruise needs to have his own category of action movie at this point because that's what he's specializing in now. It's like that's all he wants to do.
That's basically all he does. He's done a few other dramas, in the past, like A Few Good Men.
Well, yeah, but that was way past. I mean, he's breaking past his, he has, romantic comedy
primarily,
parts.
Become, an action movie star. And there are other actors, that fall primarily into that category. You've got Sylvester Stallone and Schwarzenegger that are, the typical action movie.
Yeah, all the guys that are in that. Oh, what's that compilation movie where like all the superheroes...
The Expendables?
The Expendables, yeah.
They're
like all the old action heroes gathered together.
A good action series.
Those
and
just make me
they're
laugh.
all, action stars. But there's been a lot more of, like I said, the extreme action movies. Like John Wick, Jack Reacher, Atomic Blonde.
Oh, Atomic Blonde just... Yeah, I'll try not to say this too much, but kicked ass.
Oh, very much so.
I loved it.
A very good, female-driven, extreme action movie.
And it's mostly stunt work, but at the same time, that's what makes a great movie, is good stunt people.
In my opinion, it can hold its own against stuff like John Wick and Jack Reacher, in that category because it was some very good extreme action and it was very well done. You've got other recent stuff like The Kingsman.
I love the Kingsman movies.
The first,
there's so much humor in that one too.
Yeah, but there's humor, but it's mainly action driven. There's story and purpose behind what they're doing.
It's because it gets a lot of the purpose and action inspired from like the Bond films. It's like a more comedic Bond.
Yes, a more comedic, more modern, extreme action Bond. Mm-hmm. And Bond is another, long running, from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up, to current.
Definitely a long action.
Action franchise that, does have some drama and occasional, humor here and there, but it's very action oriented.
And I think everybody has their flavor of action movies that they like the best. Some people like the sci-fi action movies, like I consider The Matrix an action movie because it's very action driven in its story.
The Matrix trilogy is very, action oriented.
But then you get action adventure movies like Indiana Jones. All of those are just awesome, fun, action oriented.
Well, those action adventures are good hybrids between an action-driven movie and adventure story-driven movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Indiana Jones isn't always fighting or running or shooting. There's research
adventure
and learning
story
and
behind it.
Getting educated on stuff where he's researching or whoever he's working with is researching and learning.
But it still falls into the
stuff.
action adventure movie.
But it is still very action
and it
heavy.
inspired like the modern movies, like we're talking about, the modern action movies, like the Lara Croft movie, the latest one with I'll have to look up her name, but the one inspired by the video game, the recent video game.
Yeah, the reboot of
the first
of the video
and second
game
Lara
franchise.
Croft movies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movies were good.
They were good at the time, but I think they were lacking.
They were good for
a little.
The incarnation and or I guess representation of Lara Croft at the time.
Yeah, but I like
we now have and that's not knocking Angelina Jolie at all, or writers, producers of those movies, but I think the new one was much better done.
I agree.
A fantastic actress, playing Lara Croft, and right now
Alicia Vikander, I think is her name.
Vikander?
Vikander.
Yeah.
Okay. I just can't remember her name.
Yeah.
But she depicted the character from the video game because I loved the video games. I played those like crazy.
Yeah, good reboot to the video games.
Because she played the innocent but smart, clever, action-oriented character.
And you see her
from
evolve.
The beginning.
Yeah, evolve from being, this innocent, not overly action-oriented person. Not the adventurer that she turns into.
She was a boxer, and she was a bike messenger with like the super cool moves. I mean, she was action oriented in her own way.
But not the extreme Lara Croft that you see in the video games in the previous movies.
She was kind of forced into that as the movie progresses, and that makes more sense.
In the previous movies, you started off in the very first Tomb Raider movie. Lara Croft, the character, was already established,
Yeah, she was already rich, clever, bad.
Already doing her thing, being, the adventurous archaeologist / Tomb Raider, that you expect from the games. There was no
introduction.
No intro, no backstory, no real character development. You had to go into that movie kind of knowing who the character was and what she was about.
Yeah, you knew who she was at the time.
Whereas this one introduces you to, the young Lara Croft, and you see her...
You see her develop.
Kind of develop and become the Tomb Raider. Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons I like those kinds of developed action movies where you see them become who they are. This one you hadn't seen, but like IP Man and like the Kung Fu action films, the best ones are the ones not where it's just like a guy thrown into an action film. It's one where you see the character develop from who he is and being forced into the fight and being, what moral, internal struggles you have. That it does feed into a good action movie. But you do have action movies that just jump straight into it.
It does.
I mean, like Fast and the Furious and stuff like that is like bam, straight into action almost all the time.
Yeah, because at the start of that franchise, when you start the first movie, they're already doing the car thing. You know,
Yeah,
they've already got the
it.
souped up cars and doing the races, and they're already established in their sort of racing community. They're already, names.
Yeah, and so
people
you see,
know, who they are.
Here's where they are. This is what happens.
Yeah,
you know,
and along the way, they kind of, give you some backstory, of what's going on, how they're, involved in this, community and so on. But their characters, that's kind of the start of their history. And you see over the whole franchise of movies, you see those characters evolve, from what they start off seeming like, just carefree racers, that are also, hijacking, trucking shipments and stuff. And they evolve into people.
it's you go from the 2-dimensional character to a 3-dimensional character within the film.
Over the franchise of what, 7, 8 movies?
Well, yeah.
8 movies now?
That's what you love to see in any movie. You love to see some kind of development. Otherwise, you're just watching an action movie for an action movie's sake with no development.
Evolved and developed, yeah.
Fairly sure there are some action movies out there that have no development, that are just action movies for action movie's sake.
Yes, I can give you a good example of throwing you into an action adventure movie with
Which one?
No character development. And that was the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Ironic, isn't it? Because there's usually some kind of character development in those movies.
You would think, but you have to go in.
Oh my god, it's a dog snoring.
Yes. That's Tonks sleeping about 4 feet away from us, and she is snoring like mad.
Just as a side note, are you sure that's not Oberon? Nope, that's not.
No, that's Tonks.
We have 2 dogs. That's derail things terribly, but you did see Tonks briefly in the last movie, or last video of our podcast.
The last podcast, she did kind of poke her nose into the game there. Anyway, as I was saying, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, they just throw characters at you of, D&D classes. You've got a rogue and a warrior. If you don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you have no idea what these people's particular skills are supposed to be.
No,
what they're doing. There was no character development. I mean,
no talk about who they are, what they do. It was
no
just
history. Why they are?
All right, you are what you are. Go.
Yeah. Why? Why did you become a thief, a rogue, a pickpocket, whatever you consider yourself?
Yeah.
There was nothing. And then if you happen upon the DVD. And you go in and you look at deleted scenes.
They took out the deleted scenes.
The character development is in the deleted scenes. If they had left those in, you would have gotten that character development.
The same thing.
And it would have helped the story along so much better, but they cut all of that stuff.
The same thing to me.
And left it out.
Happened in the Total Recall movie. The original Total Recall movie I loved, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's very sci-fi adventure action movie flick. It's a fun one just to watch on a rainy day kind of thing.
It qualifies as an action movie.
The new remake, I had high hopes for it. But when I saw it in the theater, I didn't really like it. It was like it just threw you into the action without actually developing the characters just a little bit. But there was one cutscene that they could have left in that I think would have added a little more heart and a little more, like, it really explained the relationship between these 2 people in the cutscene. So I would rather watch the director's cut, which included that film later on, than the theatrical release, because it made more sense and it meant more. It made the action mean more.
Well, a lot of that happens because they have to cut stuff, for runtime, so they don't end up with a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, but you gotta be careful you're not cutting the wrong thing. That's the problem.
And that happens quite often, but you end up with, a theatrical cut that has some important stuff cut out because focus groups complained about this or that, or they complained about the length of the movie. So they cut stuff that wasn't necessary to tell the whole story, but maybe necessary for character development, to get you to care about the character more. And yeah, you'll get those in the director's cuts. That's why you start seeing a lot more of those, because the director will say, okay, we'll cut, this scene and this scene and this scene, to cut it down, to give it a 2 hour and 15-minute runtime instead of 2:45.
And there's times where they completely re-edit a movie to make it better.
With the intent to release a director's cut where they can add all that stuff back in that they really want in the story.
Another good example of a good director's cut recently, the Justice League movie. Whenever we saw it in the theaters, the pacing was weird. To me, it was something with the pacing of that movie was odd, but the director's cut, the extended edition, made total sense. They re-edited it a little bit, added better pacing. I'm like, the edit... You were supposed to turn that off.
Yes, I was. That was my phone.
Sorry about
alert.
that. We're just having fun. A lot of audio interruptions. But the director's cut of Justice League is a much better watch than the theatrical release.
I agree. And the stuff that got edited back in, like I said, helped with the pacing and the flow of the movie, but wasn't drastically noticeable as... There was no like neon sign saying, hey, this is new content you didn't see before.
It wasn't new content. It was just presented at different times. There was some cutting back and forth here at times differently.
It fit in, so smoothly and seamlessly that you unless you had just watched them back to back, that you wouldn't necessarily notice the extra content going back in. Which to me says it should have been there to begin with.
Yeah, it should have been there. It should have been done in that way. Like I said,
sacrifices made, for the sake of runtime, or
I think it was more
to make the studio happy, or...
Well, or it could just been they sped the editing process too fast and they didn't spend enough time on it. Because if you sit and you work on your edits, and you sit and you work out your pacing better, it takes time. It's not something that's instantaneous. So if they quickly push the production and like, get it out, maybe they just didn't have that second or third watch like they should have to make sure it was right.
Well, actually, it would be more the opposite. They didn't spend enough time.
Oh, that's what I meant. They didn't spend enough time doing it.
They went through and said, okay, we can, if they have to, cut the runtime, say, okay, we can cut this and this and this, but then don't go back and look at how it affects the pacing.
Make sure how it affects everything.
They may look at, the scene before what they cut and the scene after to see how smoothly they flow together. But looking, at, half an hour prior to your cut, and further after to see how it affects, the long-term flow of the movie. They should have spent a little more time in editing it to smooth it out.
Agreed. I mean, and sometimes a movie really thrives on the editing. I mean, that it's what makes the movie. And like when I just mentioned just earlier today was Baby Driver. Baby Driver's a new movie that came out. And it's out,
it's out on video now,
basically now.
I think it was a 2018 movie, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. It wasn't out it hasn't been very long.
Very, very good. Another
Baby Driver is basically a heisty movie. I say heisty because it's very action oriented as well.
A lot like, chases. As we were talking about with the Fast and the Furious, it's a very car action movie. And Baby Driver, he's a getaway driver for bank heists and you'd have to. I would recommend watching the movie.
But the best part of it is the editing, because the music he listens to, it fits thematically and also just like pacing wise with the action in the movie. So like the soundtrack becomes the score, becomes the editing pace of the whole movie, and it is so seamless.
Yes,
that it's astonishing. It's a great watch.
The baby, the driver, he's got tinnitus and inner ear sort of buzzing. So he drowns that out by listening to music. He carries around an iPod, and earbuds that he sticks in and listens to while he drives.
And the fast pace or the slow pace music helps. Yeah,
he will set up a playlist of the songs he's going to listen to as he's preparing for a job, and he's got a lot of that stuff, sort of timed out. To where he's got sort of, audible cues in his music.
It's not like timed out like Hudson Hawk is timed out.
That's what I was going to compare it to was Hudson Hawk.
Okay, we'll review that one in just a second.
Another
Baby Driver
movie.
It's more of a beat. Like the beat of the music is what sets the pace of his driving and his action and his walking.
Not the exact runtime like Hudson Hawk was, where he could, name a song and, how long, the release cut was of the studio
Baby Driver aside, Hudson Hawk is an older movie that people used to make fun of a lot. I still think it's funny. I love the movie because it's ridiculous.
It is a fantastic movie.
It's Bruce Willis as a thief, and he listens to the runtime of music. Like if a song is 2 minutes and 37 seconds, he knows it takes him 2 minutes and 37 seconds to break into this particular thing. So he hums it to himself or sings it to himself to make sure he's on time.
Right. If he knows that he's got, like I said, a specific amount of time to get into a place or out of a place before the alarm goes off. He
picks a song.
He'll pick a song, of similar runtime. And he'll sing it. And he'll either sing it or he'll sing it in his head or hum it because he's so familiar with the music that by the time he's finished singing it, he knows he's hit that runtime, and if he's not out by then...
Hearing Bruce Willis going in and stealing a art piece and singing, "Would you live on a star?" It's the funniest thing in the world. And yeah, it's probably one of the worst movies that he's made in his career.
No, I wouldn't say worst. I mean, it's not, going to be any big, huge blockbuster, anyway. Critically acclaimed winning awards, but it's a very entertaining movie.
It's pretty ridiculous.
And it's been out for, a couple of decades now.
So
I'm if
you haven't heard of it,
haven't seen it, I don't know where you've been hiding because, I mean, it's...
They probably hadn't been born yet, is what it is.
But yeah, his activities are very, music oriented as far as the timing. And like she said with Baby Driver, it's more the beat and the drive of the music. Yeah.
I mean, and music can really make or break a movie.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we have, discussed this week, in comparing notes on what makes a good action movie. I mean, obviously you've got to have, a good protagonist, a good guy.
A good guy, and a really good bad guy. Because sometimes it makes the movie too. You've got to have,
your good choreography,
action,
good, good purpose scenes behind what they're doing. But yeah, you need to have a good soundtrack.
Well, good score or soundtrack. I was trying to figure out if there was a theme or music to certain action movies that you just pop in your head. I mean, like, obvious ones are Indiana Jones. That theme is there.
Right. There's a difference between a movie score and a movie soundtrack. And it really depends on the type of movie. Like I said, Indiana Jones, it's all mainly instrumental stuff, that...
Yeah, but you hear that
plays,
and it's Indiana
under
Jones.
The action and what's going on in the movie. And yes, they're very, very recognizable, themes. And it really depends on the type of movie as to whether or not it needs a score or needs a soundtrack.
Everything needs something.
Well, you're going to have some sort of music in the background.
Music can make or break a movie.
Yes, it definitely can. Like we talked about earlier, the 300.
Yeah, that's definitely a score.
It has a good, powerful score to it.
If you need a primary example, not action movie, Harry Potter is one where it has a great score.
A great score. And when you hear it is recognizable. When you hear it, your brain automatically goes to Harry Potter. You know what that's associated with. Yeah. It doesn't need vocal songs. It's all instrumental, in the background, so you can focus on what's being said in the movie. Or, you hear, like in the 300, you hear the clash of, swords and spears on shields, and you get all the action sound that could be somewhat drowned out by... vocal songs, of a soundtrack, but then you've got...
unlike Mission Impossible, you get that movie, and it's score-based, but it has that ideal score that you always remember.
You've got the recognizable Mission Impossible
You know it
theme.
When you hear it, yeah.
Just like, older movies, like the Rocky franchise. You've got that recognizable Rocky theme. When you hear it, you immediately know Rocky. Yeah. But... also, it had some recognizable soundtrack songs, like Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, Eye of the Tiger, but that's part of the soundtrack. But you hear that song, and you think of the movie.
Both. You get, both of those in some movies.
That's like Danger Zone with Top Gun. You hear that, and you're like, that's
Kenny Loggins,
Top Gun.
Highway to the Danger Zone. Yes, you hear that, and you think Top Gun. You know it from Top Gun. And
there's some songs you are always associated with movies. I mean, that's...
like we talked about last week when we were reviewing Bumblebee. We talked about the old Transformers, the movie, and old, Transformers cartoons. The soundtrack from Transformers the movie is fantastic. And if you've seen Transformers the movie, you'll recognize those songs when you hear them. Mm-hmm. outside the movie.
So it just kind of...
Depending on how many times you've seen the movie, and enough to recognize certain songs.
Well, some are just like, even if you haven't seen the movie, you know it's associated with it. Because earlier today we were playing Queen. Oh, was it the Princess of the Universe song?
Yep. The Highlander
when you hear
soundtrack.
That Princess of the Universe, you think of Highlander. There's just no way around it because it was made for that movie.
Yes, Princess of the Universe. Who Wants to Live Forever?
Oh, I love that song.
The Kurgan's theme. Queen put out some fantastic songs for that movie.
Yeah, specifically. So you hear the song, you know it's associated with the movie.
Queen was big on doing soundtrack work.
That was the one thing they did not cover in Bohemian Rhapsody that I wish they had.
They should have really
touch on the movie soundtrack work.
One Vision from the Iron Eagle soundtrack.
Oh, love that
fantastic song. The Flash Gordon theme. Hello?
Flash.
Yes, exactly. Majorly recognizable soundtracks.
That was
for
made
movies
for those movies.
That you hear them and you're like I said, your brain immediately goes to the movie.
And I tell you,
it brings back certain scenes or
just it gives you that energy because like my whole body will get tingles when I hear just great music, and it's just like I get those goosebumps up and down when I'm thinking about it. And and Queen is one of those. Even the Bohemian Rhapsody song associated for me goes to Wayne's World, the movie.
Exactly.
Even though that's not action, I'm just saying it's associated with a movie.
Exactly. You hear it and you can't help but think of
Wayne's World. Mike Myers singing.
That whole scene in the car,
with all them,
where
being
they're all
dorks.
and it comes on the radio. That's, recognizable songs, on a good soundtrack. Also, more recently in the last few years, another, I think, is a good example of this, the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies.
Oh,
1
yes.
and 2. Fantastic.
The tracks they selected for those movies.
Selected was, it was fantastic. It was,
and some of it was older
a good selection.
70s, 80s music.
Well, because, the music that he had with him was from the 70s, the mixtape that his mother made him.
Which makes sense, but they also, every song means something to him. So it evokes the same emotions when you're thinking about listening to the song in the car versus, and you think of the movie. Right,
and that soundtrack had such an impact on viewers that those songs started getting a lot more playtime.
On
radio stations. If you start listening, to oldies stations, or you're listening to stuff on satellite radio, the 70s channel and stuff like that, you would start hearing those played a lot more because people recognized them, wanted to hear them. And it really got, traction. And
bringing in older music to modern movies helps twofold. One, it brings an older audience in that knows those songs, and it brings a younger audience in to recognize those songs. And I think it's worked in Guardians of the Galaxy, it's worked in Atomic Blonde, and even in Transformers, there was some music that was from the 80s, and it brings in those... Well, it helps meld an audience into one movie. The movie
was an 80s movie, so the music had that sort of 80s, glam metal feel to it. Atomic Blonde, the movie, the time frame, the setting of the movie it's set in the 80s.
Yeah, it was set in that time period.
In the late 80s, right, with just days before, the Berlin Wall was coming down. But the build up to it, was earlier in the 80s,
Trying to remember all the songs in it.
Yeah, you're going to have more 80s themed songs on that soundtrack.
And that's what made it fun, because that was made in that era. But
another one we were talking about earlier, Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. And a lot of people, complained about, it was used in the movie twice, at the beginning of the movie and sort of at the end of the movie.
But historically, it was made because of the Thor character. So it was about that character in the song. So it made sense to use it in the movie. But I also remember, this is stupid.
The placement at the end, the big, fight scene on the Rainbow Bridge.
That was the perfect place to have it.
You can tell by watching that whole fight sequence, they went into it planning to have this song there.
Yeah,
because
the
choreography and the pacing and the editing fits the flow of the song so well, where it cuts between, Thor just well, no pun intended,
hammering at them.
All of these, minions on the bridge, even though he didn't have his hammer.
Yeah, but he was hammering them with lightning bolts.
And
that's just what he does now.
It cuts to, Valkyrie coming off the ship and getting involved in the fight. And then it shifts to, the fight between Fenris and the Hulk. And, I mean, they edited that whole sequence with that song in mind.
And action movies...
And when you hear that song, I see that fight sequence in my head. I mean, it immediately takes me there.
Previously, when that song was played, I saw Viking Kitties, because there was an infamous long time ago
Viking Kitties video that was floating around
cartoony,
YouTube.
Video of cats in a Viking boat,
a little Viking helmet.
Helmet doing the and it was just hilarious, and it kind of went viral.
Yes.
And, it was fun. So, I'm going to have to dig up that video so I can show people what I'm talking about. But action movies, in my own sense, cartoon action movies is its own genre in itself. Comic book action movies is becoming its own genre on its own now.
Oh yeah, it's its own
all the DC universe and the Marvel universe and everything.
Action movies.
But you've got flavors of action movies that I think can cater to almost anybody. You've got Western action movies, because Westerns were like one of the original action movies.
Westerns, a good subgenre of action movie.
Next to the Kung Fu type movies.
Jackie Chan, and Bruce Lee,
Jet Li,
and Jet Li, all of those types of action movies. They're good action movies. They're not the more modern extreme action movies. Well, but they're still very good action movies. They were
their own genre. I mean, they kind of still are.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're making another, like, IP Man 5 coming out soon, or something like that. They're making a Rambo 5.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that on IMDb today. Went, what? Another one?
Well, that goes back to, the topic of what makes a good action movie. Yeah, you've got to have a good soundtrack. The good hero, the good bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to have good choreography, which goes into like a lot of the Kung Fu movies, the IP Man that you were talking about, Jackie Chan stuff, the Bruce Lee movies, Chuck Norris movies, Jet Li movies. Those are
and God
really,
forbid the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies.
Well, even Van Damme, you've got to have good choreography in fight movies.
Well, because if it doesn't look real enough or doesn't look good enough, it's not believable. But also, you don't want to repeat the same kind of action in every action movie. Otherwise, it just gets redundant. Well, and it's not as exciting.
Talking about Van Damme again.
Redundant?
Well, repetitive. And, I mean, Van Damme, started doing action stuff in the 80s. But if you go back and look at like his body of work doing all of his action movies.
It's kind of the same formula. It's formula is what it is.
Yes.
It's a formula.
You will see at some point in every Van Damme movie, where he's going to stand there and take, repetitive kick after kick after kick to his torso. Kick to the ribs, kick to the rib, kick to the ribs. 3 or 4 times and take it like, it's a fly landing on him.
Yeah.
Trying to show, he's tough. He can take a kick or he can take a punch, You can see almost the same exact scene in every one of his movies. It's just his wardrobe is different. The set that he's on is different, but it's the same, sequence of events in every movie.
Well, I haven't seen all the Rocky movies, so don't judge me too much on this. But I kind of think that Rocky movies have their own formula as well. The underdog. It's this is, somebody's going to get kicked down, beat down, and then they come back up going, yay, I'm the champion, or something of that sort.
There is that formula.
There are formulas that people still like. And that's not saying formulas are bad. I just like seeing something unique and different.
No, but with that formula, you're going to be less likely to go see, Rocky 17 if it's been that same formula through all 17 movies, where there's the build-up and then,
well, they have to mix up the
hero,
actors.
The hero plummets.
But,
and you think, oh, well, is he going to, win? Is he going to come back from this or whatever? And then, at the end, he does eventually come back from it, to win. Like I said, Rocky 17, that would get kind of boring after a while. And by the time we got around to Rocky 17, Stallone would be rather old, to be boxing, but
if you got to 17, he'd be a head in a jar. I mean, come on.
That's why they're not really doing, Rocky 8, 9, 12. They branched off with Creed and Creed 2, which,
well, it passed
was
on
the son
torch
of
basically
Apollo
to
Creed,
different
where he's
generation.
more coaching, the new boxers now than doing the boxing himself. So, they can still kind of, move a franchise forward without having to repeat that formula over
some
and over.
franchises know how to reinvent themselves. Like the Mad Max movies. The original Mad Max movies kind of were formulaic and straightforward and just, crazy. But the Fury Road just blew... I mean, it had the Thunderdome sort of flavor, but it went crazy.
Well, it still had that Mad Max feel. The post-apocalyptic future, all of the kind of cobbled together cars and armor and
but
wasteland
the car chases
feel.
And the fun. I mean, that was serious adrenaline action movie.
Yes,
I
very,
love that.
very, adrenaline heavy movie.
I think
that's one of the things I was talking about earlier is some of the more extreme, action movies that the genre has sort of evolved into. Because you've got, action movies, like I said, go back decades. You were talking about Westerns.
Yeah.
John Wayne. Love
all the spaghetti
John
Westerns and stuff.
All of the old, John Wayne Westerns. And you've got the Clint Eastwood spaghetti Westerns.
He's like a fistful of dollars and all that.
Yeah. Fistful of dollars, for a few dollars more, the good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of those. You've got, some great stuff that you don't really get much anymore. You don't get many Westerns anymore. You'll get...
Well, no, they have come up with some really good Westerns we have not seen yet. Like
I said, you don't get many. They still, come out with some. You had some that, are set, back in that time period, like around, the Civil War or after. Stuff like Django Unchained was kind of in that time period, although it wasn't, full-on Western.
Different kind of...
Like I said, time period, but I don't...
Tarantino movies are their own kind of movie. They're not really action movies. They are
kind of has his own genre.
They're their own world. Not that it's bad. I love Pulp Fiction and I love
time
Tarantino
period.
movies.
It's set in the same sort of time period you would find a Western. There's been a few others. You'll get one or two every couple of years. But I mean, you don't get it's a normal, consistent genre. But same thing with like almost action movies. Good action movies give you that adrenaline rush, and so anything that gives you that adrenaline rush would be a good action movie, even if it's a horror movie or thriller. It's got to have that adrenaline rush, like, that push, that
like Alien
that
is an action movie in its own horror sense.
Action, but it all it qualifies as action and sci-fi and somewhat horror thriller.
What was the one recently where it was all first person? Is that Hardcore Harry?
Was it the Hardcore Harry or like Hardcore Henry?
I can't remember.
But it was filmed like a first-person shooter game where the entire movie, see it from the first-person point of view of
you see his arms and stuff.
Hardcore. I think it was Hardcore Harry?
I'm gonna have to look at it.
But it was really good.
But that was totally adrenaline rushed. Completely.
And I think they may have taken their kind of cues off the Doom movie.
It's Hardcore Henry.
Hardcore Henry.
Yeah.
Okay. But
I think you're going to make a second one.
If you've seen the Doom movie that had The Rock in it, there's at a certain point in the movie where, the big conflict, starts, to get to the sort of the big end fight sequence. It shifts over to the first-person point of view that you would recognize from playing the original Doom game.
I don't know if that was the best example, but
I'm just saying,
an example.
That gave you a taste of it. So this one moved on and took you full, start
full
to
immersive,
beginning, full first-person view of the entire movie.
Well, in Hardcore Henry, the further along you get, you realize why he is how he is. So there is some character development, but at the same time, I think the niche is just the fact that it's
a very unique take on an action movie.
I think we saw it in 3D, which actually was the best way to see it.
I enjoyed it a lot, and I mean, if you're a big first-person shooter gamer, and you like good action movies, give it a shot. It's entertaining, and it's worth the couple hours of watching.
I would say the best way to possibly see Hardcore Henry is with a VR helmet on, or stick your phone into your eye socket so it looks like you're first person the whole way through. That would probably be the best way to watch it.
Yeah, or if you can find like a 3D version of the Blu-ray and you've got a 3D TV, that
there you go. That'd be a way to do it.
That would go a long way to enhancing the
There's
movie.
not a whole lot of 3D action movies, are there? I mean,
you'll get some stuff. Some of the superhero stuff you'll get in 3D. Yeah, you can catch it on
3D here and there. But like the Mission Impossibles were never in 3D that I recall.
Well,
I mean,
3D. We could really, do an entire show on
whether 3D is worth it or not.
On 3D, because there have been some very good 3D movies where they've done the 3D well, and others that just there was no point. They kind of half-assed it, and like they got halfway through the movie and forgot they were supposed to be doing 3D, and like the 3D just stopped or went very minimal.
Well, or it just gave you a little bit of depth to the film, but it didn't give you any 3D to me should be somewhat interactive in that way. Like there should be something coming at your face at least once.
Make you feel more realistic.
It
more
should
like
seem like you're there. Yeah.
Older 3D movies, you had a lot of stuff that was deliberately flying at the screen to kind of make you jump. That's why I was saying 3D could be its own topic, in itself.
But there's not a whole lot of 3D action movies.
But if done well, it can also enhance, a good action movie, but it's not necessary for a good action movie. Mm-hmm. Some of the other, you talked about, the whole Western subgenre.
Well, there's a ton of subgenres when it comes to action movies.
I think we mentioned earlier talking about The Kingsman, sort of the modern, spy flick.
Spy flicks in itself could be its own genre. I mean...
You've got the whole long-running James Bond. Action movies, but also, some drama.
And the Bourne movies. I mean, those in itself are their... I'd say it's in a spy genre in its own way.
Yeah, it's CIA, the secret agent, sort of spy genre that...
which I did like those movies. I mean...
Really stepped up the action part of that, which also leads you to Red and Red 2.
Retired and Extremely Dangerous. I love those movies. They're so fun.
Great casting in those movies.
Helen Mirren just shocks...
Yeah.
I'm not going to cuss.
I love Helen Mirren.
She shocks me. Is what it is, and how well she does action movies.
But yeah, the whole the casting, they had
very good,
great people, in those movies, and it's very action oriented. They're all retired government operatives. Assassins, wet work experts, spies.
Definitely see Red and Red 2. They're funny, but they're also good.
Bruce Willis, John Malkovich, like I said, Helen Mirren.
It's kind of like the Expendables of spy movies, and
kind of like the Expendables.
It's like taking all the good spy movies and mashing them together.
Yeah, if you're talking about these agents that are kind of in their golden years and retired, and
that's what the Expendables did. Why not
come out of no? I'm talking about the characters themselves are retired and end up having to come out of retirement. Which added to, some of the humor.
Yeah. Which, I mean, humorous action movies actually are pretty freaking fun. I mean, I don't know how to explain.
Well, like I said, you've got movies that fall into different categories. You talked about Aliens. Well, Aliens, qualifies as an action movie, a sci-fi movie.
More like a horror sci-fi.
And a horror thriller. You've got action comedy stuff. You get, all of your buddy cop movies.
Well, I mean, action horror comedy for me is like Shaun of the Dead. That's like horror comedy action.
A good example. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. That
Hot
whole
Fuzz
sort of trilogy.
Perfect.
What was it? End of the World. The
World's
third
End.
One? World's End. That's the one. Yeah, where they do the pub crawl, action, and a lot of comedy.
Awesome. Hot Fuzz for itself is the perfect action movie satire. It takes all the tropes. It takes all of the expected stuff from Bad Boys 2 and what was that? Another Point good, Break. That kind of stuff.
Another good action franchise.
And it references all the good action movies in its own way.
And they're supposed to be releasing another Bad Boys movie.
Are they really?
Yes, they're going to.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's going to be another one.
Well, you got to do something.
Hey, the first two were really good. I liked them.
It's almost like they're messing with Will Smith's career. I mean, this is just my own opinion. Is they're remaking what are they?
Men in Black
Men in
International.
Black. They're doing Men in Black International, and they're kind of messing with his career in that way. And
well, yes and no. Men in Black International is, as the title says,
it's international. Instead of
in Men in Black 1 and 2, these were agents that were stationed in New York dealing with sort of the North America, or American branch of the Men in Black. Whereas International is dealing with like European agents or Australia or wherever else in the world.
I get that. And that would make sense, right? Because there would be other agents across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In essence, I think the sequel is becoming too overused in some genres. I think, or the remake. At some point, there's got to be some fresh ideas out there. I love fresh new ideas in movies and film. When they take a whole franchise and they reboot it, I mean, why? I mean, just to make it more modern, make the graphics better.
Yeah.
Bring it to a younger audience.
I mean, having sequels and changing things up with, the casting. Well, like we were talking about earlier with, Rocky. After a certain point, you kind of have to shift to younger actors,
Well, and that's an evolution of the story.
To split off, and evolve the story.
So I can see that.
But, yeah, if you're making Men in Black International just to make money off a name,
then it just becomes
and cutting
like
out all the original people, that to me is wrong.
I'm starting to question the whole Toy Story thing when they're coming out with another Toy Story, and I looked at the trailer and went, what are they doing with this?
Yeah. There's going to be a new Toy Story movie
but
introducing, a bunch of new characters. But kind of along, that whole line of thinking, along with the new Men in Black, they're rebooting Hellboy.
That was the one I was thinking of.
And
because
that one is pissing me off.
I liked the original Hellboys. They were funny. And they were fun.
Really liked, the first two
And
Hellboy
I like Ron
movies.
Perlman.
And yes, I love Ron Perlman. From the first time I ever saw him back in the Beauty and the Beast TV series back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where he played Vincent.
He was pretty hot back then.
Fantastic. And most anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge fan of Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah.
And he was in that show.
He was great in that.
Fantastic.
I mean, he's a great actor.
Yes, he is a fantastic actor. And he played Hellboy well.
I think he's just getting too old for the action movies, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know.
But is that a reason to completely reboot a series? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean...
or maybe they weren't.
If he's available and can do it, you should let him, make the third movie, not sort of reboot it and toss him to the side and bring in, a whole new actor if he's still available. Because, I mean, Hellboy is mostly makeup.
Yeah, it's all makeup. I mean,
there's, the made-up padded suit and, headpiece, with the cut-off horns and, all of the red, face paint and whatnot. So if you're concerned about Ron Perlman's age, that he's getting too old for it, he's too wrinkled or too gray or
can't physically handle the action or something.
Out of shape. A lot of that, is you can cover that up with the makeup, since a lot of it is makeup. They're enhancements in CG. Double. Yeah, I mean, if you're worried about him being able to do the action, yeah.
Charlize Theron probably didn't do all her stunts in Atomic Blonde.
Probably not.
I mean, they had really great stunt people.
You get a good stunt double in the suit, with the fake muscles and the face paint and everything else. If you want to
pass it on to a younger actor in Hellboy, why are you passing on to this guy? I mean, Kenneth Harbour, he's not a young actor.
I don't even know who he is.
You'd know him if you saw his face. Here, let me see your picture. You see? I'm trying to remember where he's from. He's a great actor.
Wasn't he the sheriff in Stranger Things?
Yes, he was the sheriff in Stranger Things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good actor, but not.
But he's not young.
Not somebody I would think of as Hellboy, and he doesn't come across in the trailer, the teaser that's come out. I had no idea that was him.
I mean, my point is, I think both our points is, if you're going to pass on the torch of a franchise to someone, do it to a younger audience. try to seamlessly fit it in. I mean, the Terminator movies kind of did that. I mean, they do still have Schwarzenegger back here and there, but they're trying to pass it on to a younger audience.
Has been in there. And
or younger actors.
In Genesis, they really, I think, creatively explained why the Terminator looks older than he did.
Yeah.
Because it is real living flesh wrapped around, the Terminator chassis. So it's going to
sag over time.
And if he's been in this time period for the last 20, 30, however many years of the time jump, that flesh is going to age.
And that makes sense.
So that makes sense. But, the reboot, they brought in, a new Sarah Connor,
yeah, you're not going to bring in Linda Hamilton again. I mean.
Right. But I thought they made a good choice, for Genesis.
I thought it was a great idea.
Don't reboot or make, a sequel or third, fourth, or whatever in a movie just to try and make money off the name.
You think
because if that's what you're doing, it's going to come across as just a money grab.
Do you think that's what they're doing with the Star Wars movies? I mean, they're somewhat action movies in their own way.
Yes and no. And we can get on that in a second. But an example of the cash grab, The Crow. Brandon Lee, The Crow was a good movie. They brought out The Crow City of Angels, the second movie, that was really just a cash grab, trying to make money off the name and the fame and sentiment of the first movie, and the second one,
unfortunately,
in my opinion,
because the original actor had passed away,
was not great. It wasn't very good.
If they wanted to continue it, they had to have a new actor, but you should keep that same new actor as you go. I mean, they had Dumbledore #1 in Harry Potter. He passed away. Dumbledore #2 stuck around.
They still had, the rest of the Harry Potter movies to make. You had to replace the actor.
Yes.
For a legitimate reason.
The same thing could have happened with The Crow, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, because in the first one, you had, a sort of self-encapsulated story. It was about one guy. Eric Draven, in his situation.
Okay.
At the end of the movie, there would be no reason for him to come back.
Nope.
So they turn it into this sort of cosmic entity, Crow that brings people back.
They tried to Doctor Who it.
And like I said, they did it to try and make money off the name and the theme. It wasn't really a story arc that originally lent itself to being something repetitive.
No, it was meant to be a one-off movie.
There's going to be, where there would be other people around the world that are being brought back to right wrongs or whatever. Yeah. Like this situation. They sort of twisted it and shoved it in that direction. And it really didn't fit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great. So
I just feel like if you force it too much and you don't make it a seamless transition, make it natural, and make it explainable, you're going to lose the audience. You just are. And I mean, that's sort of the thing with, with most of them. I mean, if you have a good story, stick with it. It's fine. If you don't, come up with a new idea. Come up with a brand new kind of thing that people haven't seen before. I mean, come up with Wolf Cop. I mean...
Okay.
This is a random kind of thing. Otherwise, I'll go into that in a minute. Otherwise, if you keep trying to rehashing it out and throwing it at people's faces, you're going to come up with Fantastic Four.
Yes.
Again.
A reboot for the sake of having a new Fantastic Four movie.
Just to hang on to the franchise.
That was rushed into production and into theaters so they could beat the deadline in order to retain the intellectual property. And it was...
They didn't develop it right. I mean, this was the very latest one with the young actors. And
it was bad.
It was really bad. It's a good example of a bad remake.
Well, we've talked about having to have a good hero, a good villain, a good purpose, good choreography, as far as the good action. But you've got to have a good story to hold it all together.
That's true. You have to have a great script. And if you don't have a great script, don't rush into production. There's no point. Wait. Make it good on paper. Once it's good on paper, it'll fly in the theaters.
Yeah.
Usually. I mean, if not, you can fix it a little bit here and there, but...
Yeah, some things you can tweak, with choreography and, the fight scenes and you can fix in editing and post-production with, effects, but actors
bring new dialogue to the script that, because being actors, they get into their character and they understand the purposes and needs and what they're wanting to evoke.
That they have ad-libbing and
they can ad-lib. Mm-hmm. Sometimes ad-libbing is great and sometimes it's not. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I'm just saying most actors do bring that character to life, and that's bringing the script to life. And it's that's the whole point of movies. They go in stages. Mm-hmm. They're layers of workers. Well, that's what I was saying.
With having a good
music and choreography,
protagonist, antagonist, good guy, bad guy, is you've got to have the right casting. You can have your hero perfectly cast, but if you don't cast the bad guy right,
or the counterpart, or the love interest, you've got to have that chemistry between all of the actors, it falls flat. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it just fits perfectly.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I just threw out Wolf Cop a minute ago. That was the one random movie that we caught on Netflix last year.
It's been more like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We were in a weird mood and we just went through looking at random movies.
This is the fun part about having many movies at your fingertips.
We were kind of craving
like a horror movie, but not. But it was a werewolf movie, and I like werewolf movies.
Something supernatural. And we were looking through at the time, the rating system, sort of back whenever Netflix still
had their
the star rating system.
I kind of missed the star rating system.
Where you had some movies that were 5 stars, and you could filter them. Sort them based on stars. And as you got to the bottom of the list, you started getting down to the
2-star
2 stars, 1.5 star, 1-star movies.
This one random movie had a 5-star based on stuff we'd previously watched, which is what it was. And if it had a 5-star, I went, okay, this is a 5-star for us, then let's check it out, because we might actually like it.
And we stumbled across Wolf Cop, and it is...
it's pretty gory and hilarious, is what it is.
And exceedingly cheesy
werewolf
movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, it comes across, it's.
I want to think it was filmed in Canada.
I don't think the budget was very big.
No,
but a low budget, cheesy effects, sort of cheesy acting, cheesy story, but deliberately so.
And I think
they deliberately went into it to make a cheesy movie. They knew they were making a cheesy movie.
Yeah, and they knew they were going to make it crazy. So
because of it, they ended up making a very good movie. If you like cheesy movies, I would recommend it.
It was released in 2014, mm-hmm. and the description is: an alcoholic cop blacks out, wakes up in unfamiliar surroundings, and crime scenes seem oddly familiar when the moon is out. And it's just, that in itself was like, all right, I'll have to
he's a werewolf cop. And it's funny because, like I said, it's cheesy. It's meant to be cheesy.
But it doesn't stick with the tropes of the old movies exactly.
No, not exactly, but
it tries to bring a fresh light to it, and that's what I liked about it.
And yeah, I like movies that don't take themselves too seriously, that can make fun of themselves.
Funny, yeah. I mean, that's why I like spoof movies. Like spoof movies, I consider the Cornetto series like spoof movies in their own way.
They're
spoofing zombies.
They're meant to be humorous movies, not to be a legit zombie movie or legit.
I'm not talking like the
action cop flick.
The haunted house spoof movies. What were those? Oh, those are terrible.
Oh, the
you remember what I'm talking about?
They were
kind of like the Wayans brothers.
The Wayans, spoofing the Scream.
Yeah,
movies.
Some of those were good, and some of them were just god awful terrible.
I'm drawing a complete blank now.
And
I'm sure people out there listening are screaming.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There are some spoof movies that are terrible, and some that are just fun. And then there's the random ones on YouTube that you find that you really like. And you showed me one a couple of days ago.
That actually goes back to one of the original movies we were talking about, John Wick.
Yes.
As we've covered in the previous podcasts.
He's a Nerf collector.
I'm a Nerf collector.
Not just Nerf.
Kind of have a
blaster kind of guns.
Dart blasters. The various brands, paint jobs, enhancements, modifications.
Putting super springs in them to make them like welt-worthy kind of guns.
Yeah, shoot further, faster, kind kind of supercharging them, souping them up.
Yeah.
Somebody
It's for fun.
went and produced a short video that you can find on YouTube.
I'll find a link to it and then add it
Nerf
somewhere in the end of the video.
John Wick.
Yes.
It's a parody of John Wick, but instead of using real guns, they use Nerf guns.
And oh my god, it's hilarious.
Great choreographed,
pretty good
fight
production
scenes,
quality.
With Nerf guns, Nerf blasters, various pistols, rifles. The whole sequence, you've got the character that is playing quote, quote, John Wick.
I just love the part where he like grabs a bullet out of thin air. Well, it's a dart out of thin air and whacks it into somebody's head. And it cracks me up every time.
But yeah, it's played out, like, the contract that's put out on John Wick.
But it's
for like, $7 million. And then you've got, all these, other assassins, trying to get to him through this, short film.
Can you call somebody using a blaster instead of a gun an assassin?
Well, in this world, that's, that, for the parody, that's their firearms.
What you would call it.
Yeah, you're not going to, kill somebody by, shooting a foam dart at them. But in this short...
You can, apparently.
They did. That was, the weapon of choice, and the ammunition of choice. But it's
and as far as
very
action
well
goes,
choreographed. The action is good.
It's
humorous in that it uses, like I said, Nerf blasters.
And I would say it's probably worthy of any family-oriented sort of viewing.
Yeah.
Rather than what John Wick is definitely an R-rated movie. Definitely.
Yes, very gory. Stress that enough. Or as I like to refer to it, a juicy movie.
Yeah, it's juicy
because it sprays juice everywhere. So may not be kid friendly depending on your parenting style. And
the Nerf version is.
Yes, the Nerf version.
At least you can get a little bit of fun out of it, which is what all this YouTube is all about. It's all about fun.
Yes.
So I'm gonna wrap this up by saying, if you like hearing us chat and vlog or vlog, whatever you want to call it.
Bless you.
Thank you. Definitely hit subscribe and ring the cowbell so you can get some notifications when we get the next video up. We'll be doing this weekly. And if you want to comment below. Yeah,
hopefully you've enjoyed our little rants about random and varied topics.
We will come up with something else to rant about next week. Okay, I'm Cowpatty.
I'm Cowmando.
And we will catch you another time.